The foldable phone arms race shows no sign of slowing down, with big names like Huawei, Motorola and Oppo all getting in on the action, but Samsung is the firm on the front lines. It's all in on dual screens, with the inward folding Samsung Galaxy Fold 4 now leading the charge. This 4th gen flagship gets the latest Snapdragon silicon, a triple lens camera borrowed from the Galaxy S22, and a more streamlined appearance, along with a price that confirms its premium status. Considering there remains very limited competition in this segment of the market, Samsung seems to be doing just enough each year to warrant a new version. Samsung has stood firm in what it believes a flagship foldable smartphone should look like, and the Fold 4 concurs on that front. While the Flip 4 is for people that want a foldable simply for the fact that the concept takes a standard smartphone and makes it smaller, the Fold 4 actually makes the most of the folding display tech in my mind. This is both a phone and a tablet, delivering a bigger screen for those times you want to watch a video or play a game, and becoming smaller for everything else. The blueprint for this Fold 4 is the same as all the previous versions of the phone. The phone is home to a smaller outer panel and a larger, 7.6-inch inner display that folds out. Samsung has made the screen slightly wider this time round, with a 23.1:9 aspect ratio on the inside. The change isn't monumental, but it does make the experience of watching wider content a little better. Having a wider outer display is a bonus too, since using the Fold 4 feels like using a regular phone. You won't be playing games or watching videos here, but it's handy for WhatsApp and Google Maps or simply answering phone calls. This new model is marginally lighter than the Fold 3, weighing 263 grams instead of 271 grams. That might appear like a minor reduction, but I noticed the lighter frame immediately. The Fold 4 remains a thick phone, however, roughly the thickness of the two iPhone 13s. It can be tricky to fit in smaller pockets or bags. The inner screen itself is packed with all the usual high-end features you'd find on a phone at this price. Samsung claims it can hit 1000 nits of peak brightness in HDR situations, packs a 120Hz adaptive refresh rate for smooth scrolling, supports the S Pen stylus, and has a camera tucked beneath. It's fair to say that the under-display camera on the Fold 3 was terrible, and I can't say there's been much of an improvement here. It's hard to spot the sensor, unless you're actively looking for it, or you're on a white page, but the overall quality of snaps is murky and washed out. I think the purpose of this camera is more for basic video calls, rather than snaps of yourself, and as such, its quality isn't overly important to me. The biggest issue with the display remains, though, and that's the crease. While other foldables from the likes of Oppo and Xiaomi have managed to work at removing the annoying line down the middle of the screen, Samsung doesn't seem to have bothered. It's as distracting as it was on the very first Fold device, and that's disappointing. Following use of the phone for a week, the crease does start to become less of an issue, until I scroll down a page and my finger runs over it. It's also a lot more obvious when using the phone outdoors and on brighter days, since sunlight reflects off it. Nevertheless, the quality of actual content reproduced on the screen is great. I've watched countless hours of Netflix on the tube, and read 2 books through the Kindle apps through the review process, something I'd never have done on a typical Android phone. Yet, the surface of the screen is very different to something like the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. The use of ultra-thin glass offers up a plasticky, overly reflective finish that I've found becomes grubbier a lot quicker than normal glass. The Fold 4 remains one of the only foldable phones around with an IPX8 water resistance rating, and it has Gorilla Glass Victus Plus covering the front display. Tough aluminum remains around the sides, and Samsung says it's tweaked the hinge slightly this year, too. It's quite incredible how far Samsung has come in such a short amount of time in terms of durability here, especially when you consider how terrible the first version was. You still need to be careful, of course, but I don't find myself taking any more care of the Fold 4 than I do with other phones. As with all of Samsung's flagships, the Fold 4 isn't short on power. It's rocking a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 CPU and 12 gigs of RAM, so you'd better believe apps open in the blink of an eye and animations are beautifully smooth. More importantly, multitasking is a breeze with Samsung's take on Android 12L. The new taskbar is very Windows or Mac-like, but only appears once you launch an app on the inner display, and doesn't take up very much room. It saves constant trips back to the home screen to launch your favorites, and you can pin multi-app combos, so a single tap opens 2 or 3 apps simultaneously, in the layout you want. 2 apps side by side works best, but having 3 on screen at once can be handy for making notes and copying pasting. Plus you can have a 4th in a floating window. Want to watch a YouTube video, scroll through Twitter and check your incoming chats at the same time. The Fold 4 handles it with no stuttering or slowdown. Even more demanding apps run smoothly. It helps that a lot of apps have been tweaked to better fill the big screen, including third-party ones like Microsoft Outlook, Facebook, and Google Meet. The entry-level phone gets a generous 256 gigs of storage, which should take some time to fill. But with no microSD card slot, you'll need to splash out on either the step-up 512 gigs model or top-tier 1TB version, a first for the range, but one that'll set you back more than £2,000. The Fold 4 makes modest gains over last year's model on the battery front. It has the same 4400 mAh cell, but the processor is a little more energy efficient. It'll last from morning until bedtime, unless you're glued to HDR Netflix shows or recording a lot of 4K video, but you'll definitely want to top up before lights out. 25-watt fast charging over USB-C is a long way behind the rapid flagship phones coming out of China right now, but wireless charging, with reverse charge for topping up headphones like the Galaxy Buds 2 Pro, goes some way to making up for it. On the back of the Galaxy Fold 4 you'll find 3 cameras, a main wide 50 megapixel unit, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 10 megapixel zoom lens with 30x digital zoom and 3x optical. There's also a 10 megapixel camera on the front, and, as mentioned, that 4 megapixel on the display camera inside the internal display. You're certainly not short of snappers here. Both of those claims are perfectly valid. I've been impressed by the low light performance of the Fold 4. It can bring out the brightness in dark bar scenes and landscapes, with the software doing much of the heavy lifting. It isn't as capable as the Pixel 6 Pro, which I found reproduced skin tones better, displaying greater realistic detail, but most of the snaps were usable, and this wasn't something I'd have said about previous Fold phones. The most obvious area where the Fold 4 loses ground to the Galaxy S22 Ultra is with the zoom. The 3x optical lens here is merely adequate, and the AI-assisted 30x space zoom usually left me with a grainy image. This isn't true zoom in the way the S22 Ultra has a system built for zoom photography, but rather a neat extra that you can switch to when you really need to get closer to a subject, and are happy to accept some loss in quality. Add in a camera setup worthy of its top-tier status, a welcome power boost, and the fact it's that little bit more usable as a phone than last year's effort, and the bar has very much been raised, despite Samsung still holding back in one or two areas so as not to steal too many flagship fans away from the Galaxy S22 Ultra. Samsung has nailed the durability aspects. The inner display is hard to beat for portability, and multitasking is cleverly implemented. If you're willing to spend the money, then with the Fold 4 you really are getting a device that's different. It feels futuristic, genuinely altering what you might expect from a smartphone. It's far from perfect, but this is the finest attempt yet at a foldable phone. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions you can ask them in the comments below. Also don't forget to hit the like button. Have a nice day and see you soon.